A very interesting question is what has changed since GPS was created 35 years ago, and what is likely going to happen, what the evolution is going to be for what we can predict, from what we can tell. We at Procter Gamble started with the usual model that most companies go through. We started with shared services, meaning within each function, in a pretty siloed way, we created shared work. So we combined within finance, within HR, within supply chain, procurement, and so on. We created synergies within each one of these organizations that led to better operations, lower cost, but still was a very, very short of creating an integrated end-to-end process management when the work goes across, spans multiple functions. And it is very, very critical because there is where you have a lot of hands-offs, a lot of touch points, and that is where the cost is. Because if everything was automated, if you receive an invoice from a supplier and the amount of the invoice matches the order and matches the delivery, then you pay automatically. There is a zero touch point, and the cost is virtually minimal. The moment that there is a discrepancy, you need to understand why the numbers don't match, don't coincide. Then you have to make phone calls, send emails to the vendor. Why did you invoice that amount? To your colleague, what did you order? This is what we call touch points, and these touch points could be eliminated where unnecessary. That is where the opportunity is in reducing cost. So we started pretty much there, but we missed out this ability to truly integrate end-to-end, which was then the phase two. And that also came with some different sourcing that could be creating our own service centers offshore for salary arbitrage, or outsourcing to third-party vendors, partners. Then the third stage was where we were truly driving capabilities in the business, and that is where the work became even more interesting and even more fulfilling, highly rewarding, because we were not a back office any longer, but we played an important leadership role in the business. And these capabilities included automating, digitizing processes, could be in supply chain, could be in marketing, could be in sales, could be in finance. And that was truly, truly transforming the way we were running the business in those areas. Then creating new business models, creating new opportunities with the business, and the value was in accelerating the cycle time in the business, and so going to market faster, closing the books, the financial books at the end of the month much faster, order to cash across variety of areas, in acceleration of the business cycle, and of course much more efficiency in the organization by freeing up the capacity of Procter Gamble employees. And lastly, thirdly, and importantly, experience, better experience of the employees with the services, with the work, with what they were operating, as well as our stakeholders, whether customers or our supplier partners. So that was the third stage. With the fourth, we truly scaled and institutionalized all of that And that became exponential. The value became exponential. So think about it this way: every single dollar of value we create in GBS and through GBS, we were able to generate $4 of value directly in the business. And this is documented, this is certified by our corporate finance organization. So this journey is what happened fundamentally in the last 30 years. Now, what is different today is that because we have codified all this work, what is the best sequence of steps? Who should do what are the metrics per each one of these phases, how to make sure that execution is flawless, there is operational excellence. Because of all these models creation, this codification of the work, what we do at Inixia is to help our the companies we work with, our clients, to not only execute with excellence but accelerate the value creation. And this is what we have seen across the board with a couple of dozen, maybe more companies over the last few years. And perhaps, Tony, we can elaborate a bit on some of these experiences we had, some of the use cases we went through.
Certainly. So I think the key message, Filippo, that we want to communicate here is that, it may have taken us while we were at Procter Gamble a couple of decades to come out with these models. You can leapfrog as a client because you don't need to reinvent the models. And so that's a large part of the benefit of using proven models and methodologies. And then to your point about, how have we been able to help organizations? It's interesting because the variety of companies that we have worked with on GBS range all the way from people that were planning or designing to create a shared services model and were wondering, what should I outsource? What should I insource? What is my role? How do I design the governance? And it probably took us, 2 or 3 years initially when we created this 3 or 4 decades ago. Now you can get this done in like 6 months. And you know that you're working on proven models. All the way to the other end of the spectrum, where I remember we worked with a couple of clients together last year on actually helping them figure out what their disruptive innovation is. How do you use AI? How do you organize your disruptive innovation teams? And again, the proven models are there, so you can basically just take it and reapply. So if you're a client organization or a company that is wondering what's next for me in GBS, there are a couple of takeaways. One is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But the second, and perhaps even more important takeaway, is that the more mature you get in the GBS industry, the more exponential the value. So there is quite literally no plateau, no leveling to how much value you can create in GBS. And that spirit of continually seeking to multiply the value we bring to the company is what distinguishes us from most average organizations today. So the question of what's the biggest challenge for GBS leaders today is a good one. And Filippo, I think our position of this is that it is certainly not technology. It is not cost cutting. It is much more of an identity crisis, isn't it? What do you want GBS to be? Do you want GBS to be the order taker, the one that expects mandates from senior leaders on, hey, please use GBS for X, Y, and Z? Do you want to be somebody that's great at driving efficiency inside the company? Or in many ways, do you want to become the transformation engine of the whole company? We have previously talked about you really need to be the internal McKinsey or Bain or Deloitte within the company. Because, of course, you know technology, you know your work processes, and you know transformation, or at least you should. So the biggest challenge, I think, for GBS leaders boils down to a few things. One is, what do I want to be when I grow up? The second is, how do I convince and communicate to the company that I can be more than a efficiency engine inside the company, that I can be a transformation engine inside the company? And along with that, of course, are all of the challenges around I have to run the business and I have to transform at the same time. I have people that can do one type of activity really well, but perhaps are not good at other types of activities. One of our clients happened to mention the expectation that their CEOs want them to deliver Silicon Valley type innovation at emerging market costs. But the beauty of the current situation, at least as you and I see this, Filippo, is that not only is that possible, but there are ways in which you can actually do that, isn't it?
Absolutely. And to your point, Tony, we have seen a major shift. I would say years ago, the focus of a GBS organization was 90% on cost cutting and maybe 10% on bringing capabilities and new opportunities. Now it is dramatically shifting towards a strategic role that GBS can play in the business, and all the companies who come to us, in the vast majority of the cases, of the situations, they ask for, given where I am, how can I take GBS to new heights, and how can create more value for GBS? This is a truly common need and a common opportunities. Our recommendation is to continue to play more and more in the upper stream of the GBS value creation, because the cost reduction, the efficiency will come anyways. And that will come through AI, will come through a number of other cost reduction levers that we can use, standardization, salary arbitrage. But the real opportunity where GBS can play a unique role because of the nature of the organization is in truly becoming a platform to transform the way business is done. And by the way, that is where we can bring a lot, if not all, of the AI capabilities and skills within the organization, because that becomes also a center of excellence for some of the new technologies. So in summary, the North Star in our view should be to push the envelope, the pendulum, towards creating breakthrough capabilities in the business, in operational excellence, in eliminating unnecessary defects in the business, in making the business much more performant, and at the same time build new capabilities in terms of business models, in terms of transforming manual processes into digital, and again the more traditional value of GBS will continue to come through efficiency and effectiveness. So Tony, if we were to talk about what could be GBS like in terms of role in the business, leadership, value contribution to the business, say 5-10 years from now. Of course, no one can make predictions which are certain or probably not even highly likely, but just to maybe kick around a few ideas on what is possible.
Yeah, I think that's that's very appropriate because there are trends which, if you line up, you can take a guess at where this is headed. And I'll take a crack at a couple of trends, and please jump in with others. Firstly, I think that what we call global business services, and the terminology of what you call it is immaterial. In some organizations, GBS, it's EBS, it's part of the IT organization. It doesn't really matter. I think what we're talking about is the sphere of the organization that drives internal operational agility inside the company. Now, recent studies have proven that 2/3 of any given company's comparative advantage comes from its core products and services. So if you're Apple, the iPhones and streaming media and things like that, and then 1/3 comes out of its internal operational agility. So prediction number one is that not only is there more data that proves that GBS can be a competitive advantage, but that GBS, or whatever the organization is called, starts to earn its way into becoming that 1/3 competitive organization inside the company. And so that's one thought that comes to mind. I think another thought that comes to mind is that despite the fact that this is where the future is headed, we continue to have a spectrum of organizations in terms of their maturity. And by the way, that spectrum can be inside of GBS or it can be across companies. You and I have noticed that even within the same company, you can have one part of the GBS organization that's incredibly mature and then another which is just starting off. And that's fine, that is the spectrum, that is natural. And my second prediction is that will continue to be the case. There's going to be newer and newer use cases identified. Maybe these may be functions that people never thought could be a part of GBS. They may be things that are product development or innovation or some really core stuff that nobody ever thought is part of shared services, but that it does become part of shared services. So that's another prediction. I think the third is we stop thinking about offshore as the low cost or quote unquote cheap labor unit. The evolution of GCCs, Global Capability Centers, shows that in today's world, there is no such thing as an order-taking geography and a geography that gives the orders. It just doesn't make sense. And so I think the world gets flatter in some ways. Those are some that come to mind, but please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I'm seeing that because of the great variety at which different organizations are in completely different stages, from much more back office to much more progressive and building capabilities in the business. What I'm seeing is that it is probably more important than ever what I would describe as an inflection point, to be clear about the different roles that the tools available to GBS will play. An example, of course, is AI, where AI will play. How do we win? How do we make ourselves distinctive through these new capabilities? Another one could be using partners for operations, outsourcing. So, long story short, there is a role to play for many of these capabilities and tools available to us. But what we are saying is we have to be careful not to make a last in, first out, or to be opportunistic, because inevitably the boomerang will come back. And it is more important than ever to be intentional and to stay with proven models, which are applicable always, regardless of the new technologies or AIs or whatever it may be. These are applicables in all cases. And then we need to stay consistent and very truthful to what is the strategic intent of GBS. One interesting question that we get all the time is if you were to start GBS today from scratch, what would you do differently than you had done with the benefit of the experience and some of the trial and errors you went through? And by the way, this is the same question in a slightly different way we get from companies who approach us and they ask, what shall I do? I see this big elephant, and whichever way I look at it, it's a kind of different view. What is the best sequence of steps? And our answer is, in short, the following. First, we need to be clear about the operating model. We have codified the 9 elements, the 9 components of the operating model. And I will start there because the operating model that each and every business has is the way to bring to life, to operationalize the business model. And the business model is the value creation for customers, for the clients, for the consumers, and for the GBS value creation for the business, for the internal stakeholders for the most part. So we need to start there, have a clear definition of what are the components we need to build out of the operating model. How will they interact with one another? And then be consistent and intentional in building them out. And perhaps turning to this point, perhaps we can illustrate maybe a few of these components, which particularly starting with those where we would suggest to companies, to organizations to begin their journey.
I think the first thing is decide who you want to be. Do you want to be a transformation engine, or do you want to be an order taker organization? And then depending on the answer, to your point, Filippo, there are now proven models that help you leapfrog your maturity. So you don't have to take 20 years to get to the maturity that Procter Gamble and many of the other companies took. You might be able to do it in 4 or 5 or even less. And then where you start, if you decide you want to be the transformation engine, then Filippo, I think some of the components of the operating model that you talked about include things like the organization structure. So just like any transformation organization, like a consultancy, like Accenture or Deloitte, has 3 vectors of organizing. One is the delivery, the operating centers, and that's the delivery centers or operating model, which is either insourced or outsourced. That's one part of the organization design. Then consultancies have a business unit vertical or an industry vertical. In the case of GBS, that's our product categories, isn't it? Finance shared services or HR shared services. And you have to organize along those lines. And then consultancies have a third vector of the organization structure, which is the client. And for GBS, we talk about you also need to have client managers. These are the people that really are embedded into the leadership teams of the various senior stakeholders. So you are part of the team. You are part of the boardroom. And that's an example of an operating model applied to organization design. And, we could talk a lot more about how would you therefore design the way you price GBS services or you organize your catalog of services. But this is really what we mean when we say there is an operating model that you can take and reapply with the end goal that you leapfrog maturity and get to the end state much, much faster than other companies have historically done.